Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just wait a minute or two before starting, just to give a few more people time to join. Still got a few more people joining, so we'll just give it another minute. Right, I think we can get started. So welcome everyone to today's webinar. We'll be looking at the SAP BPC roadmap, end of maintenance deadlines, impacts this will have on users, and your options. So just before we begin, a few housekeeping points. This webinar will last approximately 1 hour, with the last 15 minutes or so reserved for questions. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A or chat function, and we'll address them towards the end. Just be aware this session is being recorded, and we'll have the recording link available to share with you all afterwards. Quick overview of the agenda. So firstly, I'll give an introduction to our speakers, then we'll share an overview of the BPC roadmap, look at the impacts on current BPC users, and finally explore some of the paths open to you, including BPC support or migration to an alternative solution. So I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers, both long-standing industry leaders. We have Howard Markillie and Simon Bell. Simon and Howard share many years of experience with SAP systems, including SAP BPC, and have been leads in the EPM industry for over 30 years. Howard is the Chief Services Officer at Kabeelah, an IT consulting and services provider focused on delivering end-to-end digital business applications and technology solutions. Over the course of Howard's career, he has built up extensive experience of initiating and delivering business process improvement, primarily through the design and delivery of EPM platforms and financial reporting systems. Originally as an accountant and project manager within customer environments, and subsequently as a consultant in leading systems integrators. He's been instrumental in the delivery, commissioning, and BAU support of global consolidation and reporting solutions for FTSE-listed global organizations, including Charter PLC, Colfax, BAT, Cafe Nero, and Card Factory. Howard's well placed to add value to any organization looking to leverage the benefits of financial and business information system solutions. He brings the ability to understand business process, management information, and accounting issues, and translate these into viable system solutions and effective business processes. This is complemented by his vast experience in understanding and explaining any potential constraints, and acts as the interface between business and solutions providers. Simon is Managing Director of SAP BPC and founder of Opalwave Solutions, which he established in 2008 and built up into a leading SAP-focused EPM consultancy. Following its acquisition by Sapphire Systems in 2023, Simon continued to lead and advise the business, developing packaged planning and consolidation capabilities that were deployed to more than 30 customers over an 18-month period. He began his career as an accountant, specializing in statistically derived planning models, before moving into a consulting role at Hyperion, and later leading the European division of BPM Partners. During his career, Simon has supported organizations including IKEA, Sony PlayStation, AGCO, and Moët Hennessy in achieving their performance management goals. So today, Simon leads SAP BPC with former Opalwave colleague Sham Khan, helping organizations across Europe and the United States navigate the next stage of their EPM journey. So Simon, if I can now hand over to you to get us started, please.
Hi, Carrie. Yeah, thank you for the introductions and welcome to everyone. So it's good to see one or two names I recognise on the attendee list there, as well as a number of new names to me. So good to see those of you who are meeting again, and good to meet those of you who have not already met. But today we're going to be talking about the BPC solution roadmap and probably more importantly, what SAP has been doing or not doing, and the consequences for users, and fundamentally what people may or may not need to do or think about doing as a consequence. So I don't think to many BPC users that have been customers of SAP for a long time, it would be a great surprise to hear the phrase or to be told that SAP haven't really understood what they're doing with BPC and haven't really well served that customer base. Fundamentally, because it's not a domain that's core to their business and that they understand well at all. But really, the consequence of that has been, one, it's been difficult to get good support from SAP in the solution, but also the deficit that SAP's left in terms of failing to develop solution beyond transferring its capabilities initially onto NetWeaver and then onto BW4 to fill that box of capability, if you like, but not really taking it anywhere beyond where the original Outlooksoft organization had developed a solution originally when SAP bought them. And as a consequence, it's left that technology really trailing behind all the recent advancements that other vendors have been putting in around machine learning, artificial intelligence, especially the agentic and advanced functionality that's supporting business users or starting to support business users in the CPM space today. So what today we're really going to be looking at is where that leaves us with BPC, considering the current state of each of the different releases, and there's a little bit of just kind of technical housekeeping on that, and then as we move further through, I'll introduce Howard, and Howard will be able to talk a lot about how businesses are successfully either addressing the current BPC challenges or moving on to new solutions, and that of course is an important consideration for anybody looking at their EPM capabilities and where they take them today. So with that, I'll just cover off a little bit about where SAP thinks their BPC or their EPM or CPM capabilities should lie, and this is a chart which is an SAP graphic, as it happens, that's evolved over the last 4 or 5 years, but historically has had BPC remaining as a key component of the EPM landscape. So if we think about those core pillars of EPM, the planning side of things and the consolidation side of things, BPC as a unified platform addresses that kind of full spectrum of EPM capabilities, and obviously just talking two high level pillars there. We then look forward to what SAP did with the launch of SAC, that's the SAP Analytics Cloud, and group reporting. So of course, SAC is a hybrid BI and planning tool that sits on top of HANA warehouse, and now has been moved from a technical perspective inside the BDC, the Business Data Cloud suite, and that's very much SAP's go forward planning and BI capability, and increasingly you're seeing that as the reporting engine behind all of SAP's go forward solutions. So it's certainly a key component. We'll talk a little on what they've done with that as well in terms of sales. But the other element that they've moved forward with is group reporting. And that's the solution that SAP is now promoting to address statutory consolidation needs. Now, a challenge with group reporting is actually that it's a module inside S4, S4HANA being the replacement for ECC, the go forward SAP ERP suite. Now, that's great if you're a user of S4HANA and are committed to that as a transactional system. But it's more of a challenge if you've got a heterogeneous landscape or aren't even on an SAP ERP landscape at all, or trapped in that old ECC world where a lot of organizations currently are unable to migrate because the S4 journey hasn't actually reached them yet. So we see that those elements are very much in SAP's continuing go forward positioning. But that central bar where they'd previously been promoting BPC has really been dropped. Now, the reality is that bar was probably only there to address that kind of legacy BPC install base to evidence to them that they hadn't been forgotten. But the reality was SAP stopped promoting and have put roadblocks in the way of BPC adoption for quite some time now. So that's the SAP positioning, albeit a little bit interpreted and nuanced. But reflects really the reality of where the organization has taken people. But it's also important to just think about the context of SAP BPC and its different releases. And this is maybe just a bit of an administrative overview. I don't think that there's going to be surprises in here, maybe apart from the very last point as a bit of a change. But I've been doing webinars on BPC Roadmap for the last 7 or 8 years now. And this, or a variant of this slide's been an ever present because it's basically just understanding when things are going out of maintenance. The maintenance dates have moved over the years, but they haven't moved recently. Not insofar as the Microsoft and NetWeaver versions go anyway. So we've got a current end of maintenance of 30th of June this year, if you're still on the Microsoft version. We know there are a small number of organizations out there today, and I know Howard's certainly working with a couple as of today, working through the finalization of their migration process. And those really are up against the timelines because they need to be, well, if they wish to remain on a supported solution, they need to be off that solution by the middle of this year. But what we're seeing now is a lot of people facing up to the fact that they're still on the NetWeaver version, and the deadline for the NetWeaver version has been getting closer and closer for some time, and has been set at 31st of December in line with other SAP NetWeaver-based solutions. And technically, there is an ability to take out extended maintenance on that for an increased fee up to 2030. But it is probably kind of important to just accept that if that is the case, you are extending the maintenance on a piece of technology that hasn't benefited from any development at all for over 10 years and has no prospect of development. So that's our next cliff edge, if you like. But the one thing that has changed on our release schedule is consideration of the BPC BW 4 version. That's possibly more commonly known as the BPC 11. The BW4 version is the only release that made it as BPC 11. That's currently on 2021. We've got a release 2025 coming up, and more on that a little bit later. But one thing that's maybe a little bit opaque in the market is the actual commitment from SAP to maintain that. On the face of it, SAP are supporting all BW4 based solutions until 2040 at least, and certainly that's a commitment that they put out quite publicly, except for in the case of BPC, there has been some fairly low-key announcement that's been it was actually sneaked out in an SAP note last year relating to the BW4 version, where it, as a comment in the SAP note, did say that the current release would be is the last one that there is any commitment for maintenance on, and that extending that maintenance to further releases remained an undecided question with SAP management. So we can take a brutalist view of that, and that is the current release is supported until 2030. Or we can take and therefore there's nothing beyond that, or we can take a more charitable view that SAP management are just saying that because they don't need to, they haven't actually come to a conclusion and are looking at how they do keep that going. My personal view is that will be dropped, and we're not going to see any more BPC because SAP does not want that solution sold and does not understand why the current users haven't simply migrated onto SAC or group reporting. But what does that BW4 version look like? What does the current roadmap on that genuinely mean? Well, in a lot of senses, not much more than the NetWeaver version. Again, since its release, there hasn't been any material development. If we look at the product roadmap viewer in SAP and look at all of the enhancements applied that come up under BPC, what you'll see is that none of them are actually enhancements delivered inside BPC, other than enabling an SAC connector, and then all of the other enhancements attributed to BPC are actually developments in SAC, but displayed against BPC on the basis that it's accessible should you purchase SAC and the connector as well. So we then think about the other information that's been announced. With the 2025 release of BPC version 11, it has been confirmed that the planning application kit is no longer going to be part of BPC. And for those who remember the advent of that as a BPC component, that was the original planning application kit that was delivered free as part of BW. They removed it from BW, placed it inside BPC as part of the embedded solution, and therefore removed it as a free component and made it a chargeable component. It remains to be seen whether that reverts to being a free component that BW or BW4 users will be able to access in the future. So that's probably the one, or that is a key factor in the 2025 release of BPC. But the other notable shift really that occurred, in fact, over a year ago, is that SAP stopped paying commission on-premises solutions, including BPC, to their salespeople. So there are no salespeople incentivized to support or sell BPC. And we saw this as a progressive move some time ago, where anybody proposing BPC, even as much as 3 or 4 years ago, was being challenged by management as it wasn't the right solution. Technically, SAP won't sell a solution that's within 5 years of its end of maintenance date, and therefore technically they would need special approval now anyway for any release of BPC. But they did take away, for example, the edge releases, which allowed mid-market companies to benefit from aggressive pricing that supported their deployments. They brought to an end the PMC, that's the partner managed cloud licensing, where it could be provided as a service through partners on a cloud hosted basis. And sales for some time have been restricted to RISE subscriptions, which obviously do provide that challenge of that end of maintenance or end of support. And once you are no longer supported and being run on a cloud service, you are not the perpetual license holders, and therefore whilst a perpetual license holder could continue using the software unsupported, a RISE customer would not be able to continue beyond that end of support, because SAP's hosting for that would end as part of a subscription. So that's our current situation. Anyone with a perpetual license can continue using it, and will benefit from maintenance until at least 2030. I would suggest that beyond 2030, that would be a gamble to certainly feel committed to the continuation. So that possibly leads to the question: well, if I've got my BPC and I have a business need, should I be spending more on it? Should I be doing more? And I think there was on a possibly the last or time before webinar on this topic, somebody asked a question: should they spend anything else on BPC or buy any additional BPC? And there was a simple answer, which was no. It didn't even get any embellishment at the time. And the reality is, if you are looking at extending any EPM capabilities on a BPC platform, do consider very carefully the value that investment may have before committing to anything. You may well find that there'd be a far better way of spending the money and addressing an immediate need than spending it on BPC. So really, in summary about the BPC elements, there's an article that I published 3 or 4 weeks ago. Really does go into a lot of those things with the rationale in some level of detail that may be helpful if people are thinking about those sorts of things. But SAP's struggled with this market ever since the acquisition of Outlooksoft back in 2007. And today its focus is entirely on group reporting and SAC now as part of the business data cloud, so not even accessible as a standalone solution. So yeah, with that, I'd like to introduce Howard, because Howard in Kabeelah has been working with a number of BPC customers, both supporting them today, but also in helping them on that migration journey. And I think there's a good few thoughts and lessons that you can bring to the party. But if we think about the challenges that organizations are facing at a practical level, Howard, we've talked a little about the end of maintenance, the SAP focus, but there's other factors as well. So where do people get support from if they're still running BPC? The market's clearly losing capacity, and of course, what are the consequences of SAP's lack of investment?
Thanks, Simon. So, yeah, I will, over the next 5, 10 minutes, just try and pick off some of the key points in each of those areas. Simon's talked a lot about kind of the end of maintenance from I guess, a legal perspective, but actually, what does that mean from a practical perspective? And, what I've seen with customers I'm talking to is that they are seriously considering trying to sweat the asset because obviously, um, if they're on-prem, they already have a perpetual license, so they're looking to sweat that asset as best they can, but they are often overlooking the challenge that their underlying technology stacks, so below BPC, below application, looking at SQL, looking at Microsoft Server, particularly in the case of the Microsoft version. The Microsoft software is only certified on certain levels of those platforms, and they are now also going out of maintenance. So I know SQL Server 2016 goes out of maintenance in July this year, and Server 2016 goes out of maintenance in January 2027. So what I'm seeing is a sudden influx of questions around what can we do? Can we upgrade these platforms? Because our IT teams are concerned about security risk, because obviously if Microsoft's not supporting these platforms or these server versions, they're not going to be patching them for bugs or, obviously more importantly for security patches. So they are now in a bit of a bind trying to figure out how they can move forward and whether sweating the asset is actually going to be worth it. And the other thing that I'm seeing in a lot of cases is kind of an ostrich with its head in the sand approach, where they're leaving change to the last minute, and they're really not giving themselves enough time to think about how they're going to replace this. So they're getting caught in the catch-22 of not having time to deal with the end of maintenance timetable, but then also being pressured internally and externally to move off unsupported technology stacks. So there's a lot going on from that perspective. What we're also seeing from the SAP perspective, and Simon's talked about the kind of commercial side and not being able to sell it. As you all probably know, if you've been involved with SAP for a while, and particularly in the EPM space, they haven't been particularly good at supporting customers. It's very difficult to get hold of anybody who knows anything about BPC. Their responses are often very limited or go through extended cycles. And that's because they've lost staff themselves or have moved staff on that were experienced with the product. They've moved into other areas and they're no longer available to support it. So the customers that are having problems, even though they've got license agreements and maintenance agreements ongoing, are struggling to get access to SAP for problem solving, basically, which is obviously a big challenge. And that then flows to obviously into the partner ecosystem, where we're seeing more and more partners moving out of that space. Obviously, a big draw for consulting companies and a big revenue stream for them is the implementation of system solutions, new ones. If they can't implement a new solution, then they're looking for other alternatives, alternatives to sell into customer base and to get the consulting revenue. So there's a reducing skill base and reducing desire to focus on BPC in the partner ecosystem. But that's also something to consider in terms of the customers themselves. a lot of customers have had BPC for extended periods. We have customers that have had BPC in place in various guises now for 20, 25 years. That's a long time, and that's a lot of staff churn. And quite often, as that staff churn goes through, the knowledge of the platform, the knowledge of the solution, why it was built the way it was built, how to maintain it, actually starts to fall away and gets diluted with every change of staff, as people take less and less on and pass less and less on. So there is a danger that running the solution going forward is going to become more difficult. You're going to lose the maintenance, you're going to lose access to SAP support if it was there in the first place, but you're also not going to have the internal skills to deal with problems that may arise as you move forward. And I think that the challenge with that, obviously, is that businesses don't stand still. We've had a number of significant challenges globally over the past 4 or 5 years, and many businesses that I talk to have had to change the way they operate. They've looked at the way that they operate. They've got a new view as to how to operate more efficiently. And they're finding that the platform that they built 10, 15, 20 years ago is no longer fit for purpose. And I guess that kind of moves on into the technical debt area. 10 or 15 years ago, certainly when I was implementing solutions, it was very much the case of this was a head office solution. They didn't really care how much effort was required in the businesses to actually get data into the system. They were often using data entry, not even flat file, but just pure input forms and data entry, and relying on the businesses in the field to have the resources available to do that. That's obviously all changed now, and there's a big push towards integration and removing that drudgery of taking data from one system, manually processing it, and then keying it into another. It's costly. Finding people that want to do it in the marketplace is reducing. New young employees, new graduates into industry don't want to be just moving data around. They want to be doing analysis. They want to be working with AI, and they want to be understanding and driving things forward. So the drive to integration is really a challenge for those companies that have got these legacy systems, because they can't move them forward because they don't want to change anything and disrupt the apple cart that they've got. So if they've got a stable system now, their challenge is if they try and change anything without support, how are they going to do that? As I've mentioned, there are continuing issues with security and obviously the cyber risk. And these things are starting to build up. So the business is getting pressure of needing to reduce heads and reduce costs, and wants to improve efficiency and focus high value assets on data interrogation and data interpretation, and not just data collation. IT groups are being chased to maintain control and consider cyber risk across the board. And they're caught in the pincer movement now with the product going out of maintenance, as Simon suggested. So at Kabeelah, we've established an approach to trying to support and continue to support those customers that we have that are continuing to use BPC. So we can provide just regular support, so help desk with people that know how to use the system. So if you are, thanks Simon, if you are using the system and you want to know why a report doesn't work or how a report should work, or get guidance on building a new report, we can provide that. But beyond that, we also look to provide backfill. So if you are fortunate and you're already moving forward and looking at a new product, and you want to move your internal resources onto the new product and away from their current maintenance positions on BPC solution, we can put full-time resources in, or even part-time resources, to release those internal resources and focus them on a go-forward solution and manage your platform. So, as I talked about maintenance and the churn of staff, provide a providing resources to cover that and to put in more experienced and capable resources to give you the opportunity to try and get that step forward. That's on the legacy side, but obviously looking forward, we've started to look forward too, and we're looking at other solutions. We are working with customers, doing analysis of their current situation, developing RFPs for how they're going to move forward. We're providing support to large customers in helping them migrate off BPC solutions onto their new platform, because quite often the new software vendors don't have any skill with BPC and are struggling to extract historic data. So we're helping with that. And obviously, in our own right, we're deploying a new solution from Anaplan and others into new customers. And that's an important part of our business as well, as we seek to help our customer base move forward and pick up new solutions. So if you just drop the next slide in, Simon, if you don't mind. One of the products that we are working with at the moment is a product called Financial Consolidation Reporting, which is part of the Anaplan platform. When we started to see SAP's moves in terms of basically sunsetting BPC, we started to look for alternative solutions, and we landed on Anaplan FCR, which is a purpose-built cloud-first consolidation reporting system, which will be very familiar to many BPC users when they see it. It works the same way. It's very much a business-oriented, business-first solution, driven by business rules rather than code. And out of the box, it's got some very capable logic engines already provided, and comes alongside a very, very structured and very capable Excel reporting tool. So the things that accountants like most, being Excel, the solution has that for detailed reporting, but it also facilitates pushing reports that are built in the tool up into the web, so they can be consumed by a larger audience who perhaps don't need the detail and strength of the reporting tool. Anaplan provides this as an application as part of its overall platform. So it's a market leader in the planning space, forecasting, budget, and analysis. And now with the release of the consolidation application, they now have a unified platform that covers all bases. And underlying that platform is a product called Anaplan Data Orchestrator, which you could look at as an ETL tool, I guess, but it's more than that. It allows data to be staged and moved between the various components, between various models in Anaplan, so planning, budgeting, be it detail planning, HR, cost planning, etc. Moving the data around, pushing it into consolidation for consolidation, moving it back out for reporting, blending with budgeting, forecasting. So we've found it to be a very good tool and part of a very good and extensive ecosystem. And if you're interested in looking at the FCR or Financial Consolidation Reporting tool, we're actually doing a demo of it out on the 12th of March through a webinar. So if you haven't already signed up for that, please do, and just get a first look at it if you've not seen it before, and get a feel for whether it will potentially fit you. But you can definitely see how it's moved on from BPC, but probably taking the best bits of BPC into that workspace. So I'm pretty much covered everything I was going to cover. Simon, was there anything else?
No, thanks, Howard. That's really helpful. There's certainly some interesting points there on understanding that historic landscape of BPC in order to support people in whatever journey they take forward beyond BPC, or even keeping it alive. And there is that scenario where organizations are struggling to keep keep the lights on, but have no choice because they have other priorities that are taking precedence and they can't move forward. And the points on the staff availability are absolutely moot. We've got a customer working with who are in exactly that position. They need to keep the lights on with BPC for another 12 to 18 months. And they're out today recruiting to try and find resource to support that system internally and are very much struggling to find anybody because the market has moved on. People aren't looking for jobs in that domain anymore. They've moved to new technologies, and it's very challenging. And obviously, that poses a real practical risk on a day-to-day basis. But then coming back to your evaluation and choice of Anaplan, clearly a solution that's traditionally had a really great reputation in the planning space. Now with that consolidation capability as well, and I know that the FCR module, the component within Anaplan, does actually have some of that old BPC development legacy in it in terms of the founders and the people building the engine within there. So that does give again one of those roadmap paths for BPC users to maybe look at something that maybe BPC would have become should SAP have actually invested what they should have done in it in the first instance. But yeah, that was really helpful, I think. Thank you very much. So I think, Carrie, have we had any questions in?
Yes, we have had a couple I can see in the chat. I'll just run through, I'll start from the top. First question is, how can I archive my data that's in my BPC system when I move to a new platform?
Okay, Howard, I think that really sounds very much a practical how do you do something question, if that's one you would like to pick up.
Well, yes, I can do. So what we're seeing, I mean, there are obviously a couple of options. If you're lucky enough to have an on-prem license, then you own the software, basically. You can run it in perpetuity. It just won't be maintained and supported. So you could go down the route of putting it, taking your existing platform, mothballing it effectively, and then spinning it up as and when you need it. A couple of challenges with that. Obviously, IT teams not particularly happy with that. If it's actually on-prem rather than the cloud, then you've obviously got physical infrastructure to maintain that takes up space, etc. Not ideal. If you're on PaaS or RISE, then you don't really have any choice because you don't technically own the licenses, so you don't really have any choice of that. And with anything like that, where you say, okay, well, I'll just mothball my existing system, unless you test that system weekly to make sure that you can still access it, that it still runs, there are no problems with it, then I'll virtually guarantee that when you need it, it will not be available for whatever reason. So that becomes a challenge. One of the options that we are actively promoting and discussing with our customers and feel is probably a better option is be very focused about what data you migrate into a new system. So maybe the current live year, the previous year, 12 months, and the closing balances from the year just before that. Constrain yourselves to that. That gives you a maximum of, say, 25 periods that you actually need to load and validate against your new system, and you can run consolidation and your logic against that and validate it against what you previously reported. And then for the legacy data, and I have got customers who want to go back and store 10 years worth of data, for example. What we're suggesting to them is that they build basically a dummy system, or I call it dummy. It's got no logic in it, all it has is a complete one-for-one replica of the various hierarchies in the legacy system, and you just move the data across on a like-for-like basis. So you're taking all of the data out of your legacy platform, pushing it into the new platform, which obviously is being maintained, and it sits there. You can't run any processes against it, but if you want to report against it, you're using a common reporting tool, the same one tool that you're using for your live data. It's on a supported platform. It will be available whenever you need it. You can secure it, obviously. And that's probably the way to go forward, because you're doing it on a one-for-one basis. You can use hash totals on the data that you're moving across. Because you're not applying any logic at all, it's very easy to reconcile, because you can just see straight away that it ties. So that's probably the way that we would be suggesting most of our customers look to move their data across.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the key question for anybody is, when you're looking at your go forward reporting, what's the longest period of time you need to be able to report back on an operational basis, and then just put the balance of history into a static store, and then not apply any logic, as you wouldn't want to adjust any of it anyway, and that leaves a secure and robust trail back to where you've historically reported.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sounds helpful.
Great, thank you. So we may have already touched on this one a little bit earlier, but next question is, what challenges are you seeing in your other customers when they move from BPC?
Okay. Don, I'll let you go with this one first, Howard, and then.
So obviously, as I mentioned before, leaving it too late, I have a customer that is a large global organization with BPC Microsoft, and they have a substantial BPC real estate, a large number of models, and we're in the middle of February, and they are thinking about putting an RFP out to change from BPC to something else. Alongside that, they're also asking me for guidance on how they can upgrade the underlying IT platform, because their IT group are pushing them to get out of to move off unsupported Microsoft kit. So, it's a real challenge. That's the first one. I think what I'm also seeing is that they are then pushed into a situation where they start to think about just replacing like for like. What have I got now? That's what I need next time. They underestimate the amount of effort required to really understand what the business needs now. And this goes back to my point about things have changed probably over the last decade, both in terms of the way that business is organized, in the way that the business is funded, and in the objectives of the business overall. And most of you will be familiar with this approach, where you start off with something, and then rather than going back to the drawing board each time something significant changes, you try and patch onto it and patch onto it and patch onto it. And you build out this very large platform that meets your needs just about, as long as nothing changes. But actually, if you'd started from scratch with a green field, then you would have built it completely differently. And that's part of the challenge. A lot of these customers haven't got the recent knowledge and experience of sitting back and looking at their business requirements and taking stock and going forward with what they need now and what they think they're going to need in the next 5 to 10 years. They often don't have time to do it, and that's a key thing to consider when you're looking at these projects. They do require time and focus from usually key staff who've got day jobs. And also added to that, over time, a lot of these systems have become bedrocks and have been embedded in both culturally and also in terms of the business control infrastructure, that pulling them out, all of a sudden you realize that they're doing many more things than just providing consolidation. They tie into HR control, they tie into health and safety reporting, into ESG reporting, into lease accounting. These things have all been built on over time, and they've become intrinsic to the management and successful and smooth running of the business. And pulling them out and changing them will cause a significant amount of disruption. And that tends to be underestimated. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, really, the two together. Start early. Don't look at what you have, look at what you need now and what you need in the next 2 to 3 years. Build those requirements and look for a solution that meets those requirements. If you can do that, then you're on a good path. If you aren't able to do that, then you could just end up replacing what you have, and nobody's happy with it, and it doesn't deliver. So it's a real call to arms, I think, that SAP are kind of cutting off, certainly Microsoft, but then, as Simon's mentioned, subsequently the NetWeaver and the HANA versions.
Excellent, thank
Yeah,
you.
sounds helpful.
Right, next question is probably maybe for you, Simon. You said you wouldn't recommend anyone investing more in BPC to develop it further, even if they already have it deployed. But what if it's a critical system and the business needs the additional functionality now?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because I mean, I really struggle in virtually every instance I've come across in recent times to be able to say it is worth investing more in BPC. You've got to accept that anything you spend on BPC today has got to have a limited payback time. Clearly, we have to keep running our businesses. We can't just stop, or we can't say, well, no, we can't have that capability if we need it. So at times there will be places we've got to compromise and make some further development investment. At a basic level, I would probably say, if we've got no alternative, really look to deliver as cost effectively as possible. So that would mean no bells and whistles kind of the deployment of enhancements. But you might find a quick exercise in evaluating, is there an alternate way of achieving this that maybe takes us on a road map elsewhere, or if we've already got a roadmap, could we accelerate elements of it to address the challenge? But fundamentally, if you've got to do something in the business, you've got to do it. And we unfortunately, in those circumstances, are probably looking at something that's got a very limited payback opportunity.
Great, thank you. So last question is, my BPC solution is on-prem, but all of the main players appear to be SaaS. What do I need to think about when moving to a new solution that's SaaS?
Yeah, so well, I think it's absolutely right. Everything, all of the vendors today that you would go to in the EPM market are promoting cloud solutions as opposed to on-prem. Even those who are have been on-prem are restricting or have stopped allowing customers to go onto on-prem variants, and latest developments are clearly cloud only options. And that's not just in the EPM market, that's in virtually all software markets for the business use, or actually for any use in reality. So it is the way the world is going. Maybe that's an evaluation criteria. Was the solution that you're moving to architected on cloud or on premise, and it's a migration, because then you might be considering, is that technology maybe a little bit behind the times, and you're not far off before you're in another similar situation with another technology that has to go through a step change to something completely new again. But I think maybe Howard, what would your again experiences be, to feed into those who are actually doing migrations today, and the challenges and what they're thinking?
I think one of the first thing obviously is you need to understand the SaaS model. You're paying an annual subscription for access to the platform. Typically, you're going to be getting it over a 3-year agreement, but then consider that the vendors potentially got you over a barrel at the end of the 3 years, because all of your build, all of your models, all of your data is sitting on their cloud. And if they turn around and decide they want to increase the subscription substantially, what are you going to do about it? So, whereas with the maintenance licenses, there was usually yes, there was an increase, but it was kind of fairly steady. And you obviously had access to your data, so you could cut the license completely and still have access to your data. So that's one consideration. The other, obviously, and I see it quite a lot, I've got a couple of customers who they're doing government work or they're working with the MOD. Where is the data going to reside? Where specifically are you putting my data? Where's the data center? Is it in Europe? Is it in the UK? Is it North America? And it's critical to get your IT and your data governance teams involved in these decisions and challenging the vendors as to where your data is going to reside, because that area of legislation, that area of government intervention, for want of a better description, is a moving feast. And certainly I couldn't advocate anybody in Europe at the moment really having anything in data centers over in North America, definitely. But where does that leave you? Or what else? What are the other options? So those things are important. The other thing, I guess, which sometimes comes as a shock, you've been running a very disciplined BPC solution. You've got into a change management process. You have IT lockdown between, you've got a December year end. You put changes through for the year end in October. No, there's a system freeze then until February or March, so you can get your year end done. Software vendors are pushing out updates to their own timetable. They may allow certain customers in certain circumstances to lag behind a release, but at some point they need to catch you up. They will catch you up, and you have very little control over that. So those kind of questions, I think, are really important when looking at SaaS solutions for all businesses, because it is a different way of working, and to some extent you are losing control over certain aspects that you were probably used to having. So bear that in mind when you're going into vendor assessments and RFP processes with them.
Yeah, and I guess some of the other questions that I've seen being raised are, how do we tune our databases and manage our system performance, and questions like that, which clearly in old world of BPC you had total control on server capacity, power, etc., which often wasn't necessarily applied to the extent it could have been. But the reality is you're taking away a lot of that sort of control as well. And a very interesting point on that kind of data residency, the report sort of needs on sensitive industries to sovereign cloud, etc. So it's certainly not something which we can be going into with our eyes closed.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all for today. if anyone does have any further questions for Simon or Howard, feel free to reach out to them directly on LinkedIn or by email. Thank you to everyone for attending. We'll make the link to the recording available. So if you do want a copy, just let Howard or Simon know. We hope you can join our next webinar. If you'd like to find out more about the value of Anaplan, see a demo, that'll be on the 12th of March. And you can sign up via the event notice, which is on our LinkedIn page. So again, thank you for joining and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
No, Gary.
Thank you.
Bye.